When I eventually came to the decision to sell the property, obviously I got a couple of other valuations. They came in and they had a look, and they gave valuations that were less than Craig's, but that wasn't the decisive factor for me, as they were very hesitant about the valuations that they gave. Couldn't be, absolutely sure on what the property would fetch. Some of them were almost pessimistic about selling the property. Craig, on the other hand, was very, very clear about what he thought the property was worth, and also instilled me with confidence that he could sell it. He always reassured me that this property would sell at or about the price that he had suggested. And that obviously helped me to decide that Craig was the right agent for me. We were really pleased with how the sale went. And I think we had 3 viewings before the property formally went on the market for sale. And on the 3rd viewing, the buyer actually offered the full asking price. And I know in the background that Craig had spent some time talking to this buyer, because he was also selling a flat for this particular buyer. So he was pretty confident that the property that I was selling would appeal to the buyer. So he was absolutely right about that. He knew everything about the buyer, the fact that the buyer had a dog, the buyer liked to walk his dog around the park to the back of the property. So it was almost like a marriage made in heaven. It was the right property for the right buyer. And that was really because of Craig's contacts. And I think he probably had a very good relationship with the buyer, just as he'd had a very good relationship with me. We both trusted Craig implicitly. Yes, I found it very easy to communicate both with Craig and with Martin Gerard more generally. There were, on the day-to-day basis, one of the agents, Nick Robinson, was handling this. He was very easy to speak to. He responded very promptly to my emails. There was a sort of a slight technical legal hiccup on the way, not with the sale of my property, but with the sale of my buyer's property. And Nick was fantastic with that. I mean, he was onto the solicitors, the managing agents all the time. He was copying me into his emails. So communication never a problem. It wasn't just that, but it was when I communicated either with Nick, and particularly when I communicated with Craig. I must admit, we were very nervous about this legal technical hiccup. We were worried that it might mean that the sale would have to abort. They were always really very, very reassuring. And I felt that they'd been in this situation before, that Martin Gerard had actually sold other flats in the block, in the block of flats where our buyer's flat was located. So they knew the history of the block, and that there might be some technical problems, but we were always assured that it would come good in the end. So I would say we were panicky sellers. So Martin Gerard and Craig were perfect for us, because they always imbued us with confidence that ultimately this sale would go through. In terms of marketing the property, when we've sold other properties, we've had to pay for professional photographers to come in and take photographs of the property that you can then use to advertise the property online. And 2 things I was really surprised about Martin Gerard was, one, that they organised the photographs and didn't charge me for it. It was all included in their commission fee. And secondly, actually how good the photos were. They were very good. They presented the property in a very nice light. And I liked as well, because there were problems with the garden. Obviously, we were keen to get the property advertised online as soon as possible. But Martin Gerard advised that we should get the garden tidied up before we had the photos taken, and from what angle the photos should be taken. So actually the property presented very well when it was eventually appeared on Rightmove. One of the great things about Craig is that he's lived in the North Finchley area, I think, for the last 25 years or so. I think he knows every square inch of it. I think if you cut him, he would bleed pure North Finchley. As I think I mentioned previously, what really helped was because he knew the area so well, he knew the fact that there was the park at the back. That was why he was really able to sell it to the buyer, and because he knew the buyer had a dog and so on. It's really important, not just that the agent knows the local, area geographically, but he knows every three-bed house, which is what we were trying to sell. He will have known every three-bed house around the area, and I think he's very aware of the nuances in the market, because some roads in N12 have more of a cachet than others, and Craig seemed very well aware of it, and I think he really factored that in to the price, because when I was trying to work out what the price would be, I would just look at three-bed houses generally in N12, so that stretches nearly all the way from Free and Barnet up to Whetstone, and it can be quite a variation. It could be the same house but in a different road in a different part of the N12 postcode makes quite a difference, and Craig was very astute about that. Just to give you an example of how far Craig will go to sell a property, we were down at the property. We don't live in London, but we went down to the property to repaint it before we were going to sell it, market it online, and we were there one Saturday morning, and there was a ring at the door. And who was it but Craig, on his day off, had walked around from his own place, which I think wasn't that far away, maybe a half mile away. I think he had a leg injury at the time, so he kind of limped round. But he came round on his day off and looked around, told us what we were doing, what we needed to do in terms of painting and so on. In fact, he probably told us we were doing too much, which was a nice thing to hear. So, but anyway, he was very complimentary. So yeah, Craig went the extra mile, but Nick also did. So for example, we had a problem, any problems that we had, like we had a problem with the front door lock, Nick was straight onto it. He recommended a guy to fix the lock. I've suddenly forgotten the name of it, a keysmith or whatever you would call them. And he went down to the property and waited while the guy came round and fixed the lock on the front door. When we were wanting to get some furniture moved, Nick put us in contact with people. He was only too happy to go down and give them access to the property. I definitely felt that Martin Gerard represented very good value for money in terms of their commission fee. I did have a couple of other agents who quoted and gave me a commission fee, but that didn't in any way influence me, because I was so confident that Craig and Martin Gerard were the best agents in this particular circumstance, and that they would achieve the best possible price for the property. If anything, I suppose I shouldn't be admitting it, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the commission fee that they charged. I was very, very happy. And then, given that because of the legal and technical hiccups and everything, so yeah, stunningly good value for money, I would say. I also had a very good relationship with their letting agent, Andrew Eleftherio. And that poor guy, had, quite a significant illness during the time that they were letting the property for us. But he was always absolutely professional. So very, very good. Years and years ago, almost 20 years ago, I did sell a flat in Woodside Park through another estate agency. They were almost the epitome of the flash estate agent, the stylish suit and everything. But they actually persuaded me to sell the flat for way under its true market value, and I always regretted that. So when we came to sell this property, with all the years of interacting with Craig and Martin Gerard, they were always my number one choice. As I say, even though other agents offered to sell it, that didn't sway me at all. I always thought I would get better value for money. I would achieve a better price if I sold through Craig and Martin Gerard. Obviously, I'm not getting paid for those video testimonial, and actually this is probably the busiest time for me because I'm a university lecturer and I'm trying to get all my lectures ready for next week. But I was just so happy with the way we were treated, both by Craig and by Nick. I thought it was really important to do something to try and repay all the help that they gave us through this process. So obviously we got Nick and Craig a small gift, but this seems a better thing to do. And I think it's important when people do really good work that they get feedback on it. So it's so easy. So you get some sort of questionnaire. Will you give feedback on your experience when you had your local MOT? And that seems meaningless. But I really like this. I wasn't just asked to fill in a questionnaire and rate, out of 5 stars and so on. This was a chance to give some, personal response and personal feedback to Craig and Martin Gerard. We are about to sell another property, but sadly, it's located in Oxfordshire, and I'm really annoyed about that because I would love if Craig, it's going to be a difficult property to sell, and I would love if Craig was handling this transaction. In fact, I may, prevail upon his generosity and try and get some advice from him about selling this property. If we had another property to sell in London, we'd be straight back to Craig and Martin Gerard. I would unhesitatingly recommend them if you're selling your property in the only area I can speak of is in 12, but the North Finchley area, they would be the go-to agents.